Hello, I'm Dr. Matt Harris, and I'm going to talk to you further about the tenets of educational technology leadership. In this video, I'm going to speak specifically about being a manager, which is an important skill for being an educational technology leader. Now, I need to differentiate here a little bit because in one of the other videos I talk about leadership, being the first of many, being a senior leader within the school. And in that terminology, a leader is someone that has presence. You know, they're not taking the role of organizing systems, of making sure that things are working, of getting down into minutia or ensuring that there's an inner working of a team. They're putting people together, they're focusing on growth and improvement, and they're talking more about strategy and vision. That is incredibly vital. However, as an educational technology leader, there are systemic organizational realities that you need to account for within your system. You are going to need to manage people, manage systems, manage connections to others, manage budgets, and you need to have that as a skill set in order to be successful. The educational technology leader who's up there speaking all these wonderful things about having presence and communication and growing a team are incredibly valuable, but without the actual operational connection of making those things work on the ground and making sure that the computers are staying operational and the student curriculum is moving forward, is not going to be successful. It's kind of a connection between the theory, which would be the leadership side, and the practice, that is the management side. So as you're looking into developing your skill set around being an educational technology leader, make sure that you have an understanding about how to be a manager. Some of the elements, like around communication and presence, do spill over. But those are really more around your interactions with people. So what I would suggest you do is take some of those elements that you're working on within your leadership track and find a way to modify them in terms of your human resources management or your peer management or your communications with other departments, because you are going to have to manage those relationships externally and manage your team internally. From a human resources perspective internally, if you're a manager of a team, you're going to have to manage a very broad range of personalities, of needs, that may have some cultural implications that you're going to have some practice at. And sadly, this is not something that we train our educators very strongly on. A lot of teachers move up the ranks and become a principal, and people that they were formerly peers with, they are now managing. Well, management of people becomes a very tricky thing. Human beings have a lot of different needs. And in terms of the technology realm, you are going to be working with educators, you're going to be working with leaders, you may be working with librarians, you're going to be working with techies that are going to prefer to work with systems rather than other human beings. Each of them are going to have family situations, some of them are going to be high flyers, some are not. What I would suggest you do is go into your human resources department, maybe go online and look at human resources management, get to know your policies on campus, and then go beyond them. Figure out how you want to do performance management, figure out how you are going to handle crisis management, how are you going to deal with hiring, what are your approaches to hiring and interviewing, are there specific questions that you want to ask within an interview. As an EdTech team, we always kind of default to this position of asking about, what does technology do in education, which is very important because you need to know what those skills are and whether somebody has actual experience of integrating technology into learning, or if an IT team understands how to interact with the educational side, or how a librarian works. But there are other pieces of interviewing and human resource management that are very important. So another piece that I would very much suggest you do is go look at resources around hiring, evaluating resumes or CVs, taking a look at good interview questions. A couple of them that I like to use quite a bit, really to investigate people's passions and their capacity to learn, is I ask them to tell me about a success. What was something that was successful within your job, teaching, whatever it is, and how did you know it was successful? So they have to go beyond just the passion of what they've done. They have to talk about kind of the metrics of success. And then I give them the flip side question of, tell me a time when you failed. And what did you learn from that failure? It's a very common question you find out of HR that actually does not get asked very often, I find, and yet it is incredibly telling. because most people are not really ready for it, and we're all going to fail. So learn how to interview, learn how to deal with HR-related issues, learn what your policies will say around interactions with your employees, with growing them, the financial aspects of being an HR manager, very important. Understand your limitations of being a manager in terms of being friends with your staff or how you communicate with them. And then develop a theory, develop a kind of a way in which you're going to do performance management, whether it's evaluation, whether it's professional development, because you are going to grow these people and they need to meet specific skills within your system. So you need to have a way in which you're going to make sure that they are doing what you need to do. And this is beyond them growing professionally. There are specific tasks that they need to accomplish, and they're going to do well in some, and they're going to do poorly in others, and there's going to be opportunities for professional development. And there are ways within a management context to figure out how to deal with those. You need to become a financial manager. So you need to understand the ins and outs of financial budgeting, around procurement, around cash flow analysis, around invoicing. Those things are very important because you are buying so much. In many of the schools that I have worked in, beyond the personnel and I would say the campus maintenance people, the IT systems are the largest budget on campus. And this could be anything from a few $1,000s within a smaller school to tens of millions in a district, where you're buying devices, where you're buying systems and negotiating contracts. You need to understand how to do proper financial planning, how to ensure that the contracts are being serviced correctly, how to manage the cash flow from the finance department so that you are making your purchases at the appropriate time of year, the risk management aspects. The best way to do this is to go talk to the finance people within your own department. Now, you may have done budgeting before, that's important. There are strategies to doing budgeting in such a way that you can prioritize, or you can shift monies around, or you can potentially offload things, move them into another budget, or use different types of budgeting, and which is vital for an EdTech person because our technology shifts so much. So you may have made a request for $10,000 for iPads, and then 3 months later we find out that brand of that iPad model is gone, and now we're going to go with a different tablet solution. So you need to be able to have a way to to do the upfront budgeting that allows you some certain flexibility as you go along. And there's an art to that. If you talk with your finance people, and I would say your business directors, your CFO type folks, they will help you get the understanding of what that terminology is, understanding how accounting works, ask the appropriate cash flow questions, know about the asset management pieces, know who you have within your team to kind of take on those pieces. But that management skill is important there because you need to be able to have the discussions of what are the longer term impacts of doing this, and are we buying what we need to have here, and oh, suddenly I need to make a large scale capital expenditure. How do I do that? And just having that general knowledge is an important aspect of being a manager within an EdTech frame. There's also the management of assets, right? I mean, you're going to be procuring tons of computers, systems, and there are some management pieces there that you also need to work out. You need to understand how to make sure that you're getting what you asked for, that you have identified the correct way of doing it, that you've done a full view of what vendors you need to do, and then there is, of course, the always fun joy of dealing with vendors. You have to understand. There's an art to understanding and interacting with vendors in such a way that you maintain a mutually beneficial relationship. So many people are going to come in and sell you all sorts of things, especially when you're in a senior leadership role. They want to sell you all sorts of items to meet their quotas, to make their money, to develop you as a customer. You have to understand. You're going to be best served if you understand their motivations, their ways of operating, and the fact that everything is negotiable. And work on that negotiation. Learn how to negotiate with a vendor. Learn how to maintain that continued relationship and the trade-offs that they bring. One thing I will say pessimistically is that I've put in a number of learning management systems. I've bought tens of thousands of devices over the years. I've made connections with companies all over the world. And I have very, very rarely had a salesman come and tell me negative aspects of their system, which means you are going to find them somewhere down the road, or you need to do some pretty deep due diligence on the front end. And I would suggest your due diligence is needed in the front end. And this is a management piece that you have to pick up. So as someone comes into you and sells you something with all the bells and whistles, challenge them on just about everything. And I'm not saying be mean about it, but challenge them on, does this really work? Have you had problems? What do you do in this respect? And then ask for other people that are using the product in their own similar environments. So if you're going to do a student information system, I would talk to the references that they provide to you, go on their website, call somebody else, and then go into your networks and say, who's ever gotten rid of this particular product? Why did you get rid of it? And challenge them on that. Understand that there are going to be timings with sales, that vendors are going to want to sell you at a very particular time of year because they've got to meet numbers for the end of a quarter. And that can be advantageous and it can be a real pain. It'll be a pain because they're going to want you to buy really bad, but it's going to be advantageous because those are times that you can get discounts. So if you don't have this skill, this is something that, again, your finance department may be able to help you with. I would ask other EdTech people. I would actually get mentorship from other EdTech folks who have done this quite a bit, because that too is very important. You're going to have to do a large amount of report writing and ensuring that systems are up and running. So theoretically, you have an IT manager or there's somebody that's actually running the IT systems, but they have a bit of a bubble. They have a bit of, I just need to make sure that the network is up. I just need to make sure that this is up. You have to put a set of constraints and requirements on them to ensure that the decisions that they are making service the entire school. So backup provisioning, connections to the cloud, you need to make sure those systems, those decisions are being made and clearly documented in such a way that the student experience within the classroom, the financial operations of the school, the teaching and learning is not negatively impacted because somebody decided, you know what, we're going to shut off a bunch of Wi-Fi on the east end of campus for 4 hours because I need to go do an upgrade. So you have to kind of marry the needs of the school with the operational realities of your departments. And then you have to make sure that these people are communicating together. You, as a manager, it is your job to make sure the conduits of the school are all going through your EdTech department in a strong way. So that means ensuring that your IT department is servicing the other departments in such a way that they understand that they are a service level unit. So the IT department is working on devices, it is providing things, but really it's providing a service for other people to do their jobs. And while it is hypercritical, there are things that they are going to have to do that are outside of the norm for them. You're going to have to be very supportive and make sure that they have all the tools that they need because they have a very complex situation. And managing those needs and managing outside of the IT department or outside of the library to ensure that the resources and time and reputation are available to them is something that's going to fall under you. There is also somewhat of a philosophy of management that ties to these things. It's not as theoretical based, I would say, as a theory of leadership, but a theory of management I would suggest is one that's around diligence, that's around connecting to planning and documentation, and one that ensures that the systemic priorities of the school are met. So, you know, a school has some pretty clear operational needs, right? It's got to ensure teaching and learning, it's got to maintain financial solvency, it's got to meet some government requirements or curricular requirements, and it needs to make sure that everybody on campus is kept safe and is moving forward. If you can tie your decision making to those main pieces, you're going to be in good shape. And you're going to have a good control over everything. I would suggest that you take a step back, especially if you're new to a position and you're trying to figure out how best to manage the people and the systems and continue this level of growth, and start doing some clear mapping. So create a workflow analysis of your school, create some graphics and understand where the connections are between things. Do a bit of a high-level strategic plan about what your budgeting needs are going to be for the next few years. And then realize that as a manager, you are responsible for these things, but you are not working in isolation. And that your job is to connect people and departments together. So from an EdTech sense, you may be talking to the academics about what you would like to do in terms of EdTech coaching and connecting those with the IT realities of whatever your network infrastructure is going to be and your device availability, tied with the financial realities of what's going on at your school. So organizing those three things together and coming up with a cohesive plan is a central part of what your management responsibilities are doing. Identifying a new person to hire within an EdTech coaching field is something that you're going to have to do from an HR perspective managerially, but then you're also going to have to do some level of justification for the overall systemic growth of adding a full-time hire of somebody that's not necessarily going to be a normal classroom timetabled or scheduled teacher. So in the EdTech realm, your management, it kind of comes twofold. It comes down to the systemic and people management, where you are the person in charge, you are where the buck stops, and you have to understand how to make sure all those things are doing what they're doing. The safeguards are in place, the risk management is there, but then you are also the ringmaster. You're making sure that the data is flowing back and forth as it needs to, that the systems are being built to service each individual department, but then the system as a whole, that people are doing what they need to do to get things done, and that everything's kind of flying together. You know, you're juggling many balls in the air, and you're throwing out one here, you're throwing out one there. That's what being an EdTech manager is. And you're in a very unique situation because you're the only one that has full vision down and up. And it's incredibly exciting. I really enjoy it. It's one of the things that really draws me to the field because, like I was at my last school, and we had three very distinct academic departments. We had one business department, and then we had a head of the whole school, and then I was there creating policy and doing things for everybody. And I was the only person that had connection to every single element of the school. So when somebody said, well, we had something related to the IB, I understood how that affected our business department. Now, our principal, our head of school, had vision into all those things as well, but because he was the principal running the entire organization, he was just so far away from the direct impact of what was happening with students. As an EdTech manager, you get to see those things on the ground. You get to walk around and see what your decisions around devices, around network infrastructures, around how a library works, or your budgetary choices are affecting people directly. And you have to take those into account. So I got to see how all of my peers were operating from a managerial level. I got to see how the upper level leadership was working, and then how all of these systems were connected down at the bottom. It is an area of continuing growth. It is something that we'll talk about more when we get into systemic thinking in that video, but you have to be able to manage it. And there are times when you have to take off your leadership hat and say, I'm in charge of this. We have to make a decision. So we are going to take these steps to making a decision. Now that may mean that you decide you want to make the decision. And sometimes that's something you have to do. Oftentimes you're going to say, we're going to use these resources, we're going to use this information, and together as a team, we are going to make a decision on this particular item. You have to run that show. That is part of a big skill of being an EdTech leader. You cannot defer those decisions to somebody else, because being at the crossroads of all these departments and having IT knowledge and EdTech knowledge and connections to other schools, you are probably the most knowledgeable person in the room to offer advice on what sort of decision has to be made. And that comes from your management skills. So anyway, this is one tenet of many within being an EdTech leader. There are a number of resources out there. I would suggest you take a look at some of the EdD standards. There's some pieces in there that are helpful. I would look at some management books and some leadership books. A lot of the leadership books will talk about management pieces. I would learn how to be a financial and HR leader because those are important. And then have a very reliable IT expert within your staff that you can work with to help plan out and connect all of the IT specific resources that need to be managed, because they're going to be running the servers, but you're going to have to be designing the systems. Beyond this, we're also talking about leadership as one of the tenets, educational technology, information technology, systemic thinking, which ties a lot to this management piece, and being a professional learner. So those are all the elements in this series. This is one of the tenets of educational technology leadership. I hope you get benefit out of it. And as you're watching this video and all the other ones, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, send me a note, drop me a line, leave some comments, and maybe we can put you in contact with other people or other resources that are of value. All right, have a great day. Thanks for watching.